For the third episode of the Consciously Open podcast, I am joined by Adam Collins, founder and SEO specialist at Ignite SEO. And this podcast conversation is not going to be your typical business conversation. Yes, we're going to be speaking about our entrepreneurial journeys and more so Adam's journey. But the reason why we're here today and Adam has promised me an open and transparent, no BS conversation is because him and I have shared similar challenges and they have shaped who we have become. They have shaped how we run our businesses today. And with so much content online about success stories, today we want to kind of give you a slightly different conversation about what's really going on behind the scenes of his business, my business, more on the personal side of things. And I also promise I'll be completely transparent. So, Adam, thank you so much again for joining me. And let's start by introducing yourself and your business.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure. It's really good as well to obviously speak about such an important topic. So if the fingers crossed, even if it helps one person or one person can resonate, then it's a worthwhile conversation to have. And I think it's something that's not really spoken about enough. So to reintroduce myself, my name's Adam Collins. I would call myself an SEO expert or an SEO at heart. I run a specialized SEO agency predominantly based in London, but we work across the UK, Europe, and have customers in the US. We're a remote agency, so I empower all of my employees to embrace the remote lifestyle. So we're actually just recruiting at the moment for a team member, and she really cool conversation about how I came across her. She just gave me incredible customer service when I was buying something out, and I was like, "Do you want a job?" So I'm currently looking at recruit. Yeah, I'm currently looking to recruit right now, and she was like, "Well, where are you based? Where do I have to go to?" And I'm like, "No, it's remote. Like this is the new world." Fully remote. If you want to work in Spain, you can work in Spain. If you want to work in Bali, if you want to work in London, you can work in London. So I'm really big in my agency of, again, we spoke about before, specific titles, that corporate lifestyle. I don't really like that stuff. It's not authentic to who I am. So my goal really, and my team's goal, is that we all respect each other. We employ experts. We employ people which make each other better, and we focus on being positive, and we focus on solving outcomes for our customers. And that's really what I'm. That's the real reason, like, I'm in business, is to support our customers and support our team.
Well, you have been ranked number one SEO agency in London, right? And but that's after how many years? When did you start this business? How many years has it been to get to this stage?
Yeah, it's a great question. So this company's been, I think, 5 years. So there's a bit of a background before that, which I can go into if you'd like me to, or would you like me to cover?
Yes, I would love that. I would love that, because then we're going to go into the deep stuff, right? So, and I would really love for people to kind of learn more about your journey and yourself, Adam, because again, you and I also align on the mindset that we're not that big into titles, and there is so much like vanity and just kind of that shiny syndrome online. And I just want us to just be real today. And please do share. Yeah. How did you start? Why did you start? And why that niche?
Yeah, so really funny, actually, because I think one of the reasons what you were just saying then is I started my first business at 21. So I had a loss when I was a teenager. That sort of motivated me quite a lot, which I'm sure we'll get onto it a little bit. And then I started building websites for random companies when I was 16, 17. So I think my first was an Indian restaurant down the road. So it's like, I was sort of, there's a British series in I think the 70s or the 80s called Dowboy. Where he's sort of flogging gear off the back of a van. And so I always call myself I was like a nerdy, geeky Dowboy. Like I was selling these websites for like £400, £500. And that was like my introduction. I then went to work as a web developer for an agency, for a leading agency in the country. And then when I was 21, I soon, I think, became maybe acutely aware that I'm not the greatest employee. Like, I just didn't play the corporate thing very well. Maybe a bit too opinionated, maybe too much, not necessarily an ego, but maybe self-confidence. I think that, things need to be done differently. I need my stamp on things. And also, just really questioning why things were done. I just was not keen on the way big, large corporations run and the sort of the way that you have to act in order to succeed in those environments. Which leads me on to the second thing, which I'll get to in a bit, which is sort of the second big grief element, which was someone really inspired me to quit and to start my own business. So that sort of led me on down a path. And then I went by myself, and then I ran a full service agency for a number of years. And I learned in that time that choosing a business partner very carefully is really important.
I remember we had a conversation about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the breakup is like a divorce, honestly, when with a business partner. So, and then literally mid-COVID, I was like, you know what? Like, I really like SEO. SEO was just one of the parts we did before. I really like it. I like the core fundamentals of it. I also like the sort of core fundamental values of SEO are quite similar to elements of my personality. So I decided to go all in COVID, and I sold my shares in that business and just started again middle of COVID. And I thought, you know what? If entrepreneurship and business, being in business is meant for me, like it doesn't matter if there's a pandemic on, I'll figure it out how to make it work. And now we're 5 years on and things are going great. We've got a remote team. We're lean. We're a very lean agency. We work with some incredible customers, and yeah, the world's at my feet, I suppose. World's at the oyster. So
It's very interesting. You are on your second business now, and there's so many founders, entrepreneurs, and also successful founders who I have met who made it with the second business. They also made it with the first business, or their first business failed. Kind of, there are different stories there, but there are always challenges sometimes with the first business, which I find they teach us important lessons, and who we choose to work with and how is one of those lessons. And if I think about my first business, I was very much a people pleaser. And we didn't reach a stage of profitability that was sustainable for me to pay myself. Yet I was selling other people's services. They were making money. I was just like grinding, really. Yeah. And I learned a big lesson around boundaries, which I feel I'm still learning. And it's really inspiring to hear that it only took you 5 years, because again, on social media we see quite often these big headlines, and I don't believe in overnight success, but 5 years is not a long time to actually build a solid foundation for a business, right? It's good that you're there. So before we go into the not so professional side of entrepreneurship, what tips would you give to founders to kind of reach a stage of sustainable profitability? Because again, everyone is talking about funding, but that's not profitability. Funding doesn't make your business successful.
Yeah, so it's really great. So because I was born in the Midlands, I grew up in the Midlands. My first business was in the Midlands. So London was always on it was always somewhere which I was sort of maybe a little bit reluctant to go towards. Maybe that's imposter syndrome. Maybe that's just because I don't like things being too crowded and busy, and I'm probably quite a little anxious person deep. So my old therapist told me. I'm still an anxious child. So I think London was always on the doorstep of things that I wanted to try. When I got to London, it was a real culture shock for me. I think it's really interesting seeing the types of conversations which happen in London. I think there's a lot of positive things which happen in sort of the members clubs and the business communities, which can really have been really useful to my first business, because I didn't have that sort of exposure to people. And you see about, there's a lot of benefits to raising capital and getting investors, and the way you structure companies and organizations and networks and partnerships. But one of the things which I think really became apparent to me is that on the flip side, and I'm not saying that raising money isn't a good idea, and I think in some businesses it is, and it speeds everything on, but there's this over focus on, it's like the actual business comes last. It's exactly. Like, I want to raise £500,000. Okay, in order to do that, and I'm going to need a business. Okay, in order to do that, I'm going to need a business plan. Oh, what business should I start? Oh, okay, now I can go and get out and get investors. And it's just like, it to me feels really bizarre. And I do feel that, the way I've started all my businesses, and I'm not saying it's the right way, is go and come up with an idea, solve a problem for someone, provide value, get money, and then reinvest that money to grow your business, rather than being like, I need £500,000 of someone else's money, and and hopefully it will work, hopefully it won't. So yeah, I think I personally, what I would say to people, I've spoke to someone the other day about the same thing. He raised money, the investor became too controlling, and that he now is like, oh my god, I wish I hadn't have raised that money. Like, I would
Mhm.
just say to people, figure out what problem you want to solve, whatever it may be. Figure out what's unique to you. Figure out your own personality type and the type of business that you want to run. Because people always say, I want to solve problems for other people, but you also want to solve problems for yourself. You're running a business as much for yourself as for other people as well. So what lifestyle do you want to run? Do you want to run a massive business, or do you want to run a small, lean enterprise? The biggest recommendations I would give to people is prove the concept first and go, you know what? If I want to create X, what do I need to do? Okay, rather than having 15 people in a fancy office in Bond Street, which I can brag to everyone on LinkedIn about how
Yeah.
I invest in all these social causes, like, actually, why don't I try and do this by myself without using other people's money? Maybe I need two people. Maybe they can be part-time employees. Maybe we can actually take something to market before trying to raise money and actually prove the concept before having an investor. Because once you get that money, that isn't the end of the, that's not
100%.
the solution. That's like the start. And the difference is you now have someone down your throat. Where's this? Where's the profitability? Where's what, they want a return on their investment. So yeah, I'm interested to see what your viewpoint is, because I am always interested about why there's this mad obsession, especially in London, about spending other people's money in order to grow your own business.
I actually am of the exact same opinion as you. I don't think I've agreed with someone 100% for a while, but I
That's good.
agree not 100, 1,000%. I actually declined the 6 million proposal, like ticket,
Yeah,
potential ticket, because they wanted me to exit within three
yeah,
years.
yeah.
And I said to myself, I am building this because it's my passion, it's my heart. And as much as my mom disagreed with me and she said, have you lost your mind? You just exit, like they're like, take the money. And I was like, Mom, it's just us. Why am I bringing my mom? Because again, we are going to be speaking about the losses we have faced on our journeys and all of that, but she's now my kind of closest person, having again
Yeah.
lost my dad. And I do tend to consult more these days with her on the decisions that I make. Not that she interferes, but now it's almost like you do have someone to consider and think about when you make decisions. In the past, my previous Kristina was more of a risk taker and
Mm,
someone, because I was only thinking about myself, right?
mm.
But now I just need to think about, again, sustainable profitability, um, keeping like all sorts of like things that are very much on the personal life side as well. And similar to you, the reason why I have actually declined funding opportunities, I seem to attract them. I think when you're not actively looking for something, it finds you. That's what I find.
There's
um
a great quote. I can't remember it exactly, but it said, if you're looking for mentorship, ask for investment, and if you're looking for an investment, ask for mentorship, which I
It's
think is a
it's
great quote.
crazy. Like this is honestly, if I think about it, I'm not going to share this publicly today. Maybe that's another conversation for another time on that particular topic. But on funding, I've always seen money that's not my own, because with the Co-Created Hub, I have sacrificed holidays, I've sacrificed like shopping, whatever you can think of, to actually put money into the
Mm,
platform. Not a lot of money, by the way. I've not been reckless, but just to keep investing in it so that we can test the concept and see what's working, see what's not working. Originally, I used to run it as a private invite only founder community, and I remember when we met, I was hiring sales people and you
oh
gave
yeah,
me the best advice. And then when I ended up hiring that person a month later, he was gone. It did
yeah.
not work well. It did not. I would tell you why it did not work well. He was part of one of my previous teams that I had managed, right? I think we underestimate the pressure that working for a startup involves, especially when you're working
Mm,
directly with the founder, right? I almost had this expectation that he would think as a co-founder. And when they're part of like such a small team, right? but then they did not have the type of experience I needed. I just saw potential based on them delivering in a role with a completely different skill set that was required. So I
Yeah.
did not set him up for success, I set him up for failure, and I take full responsibility. That's why he escaped. So that was my first hire, escaped. And I'm just admitting this, and I really care about people, Adam, genuinely. Then we did like massive lead gen campaign with 9 people that did not end up well as well, so I feel like I've learned the hard way lessons about, building a team or not building a team, how to pay people, how not to, like, how to, what's the right paying structure, and all of that.
Yeah.
And that's why when it comes to funding, I found that if I was to receive funding and accept it, that comes with a certain responsibility. It's someone else's money that you do not want to waste. Like for me, I would not just play the founder game because it's cool and because it gives me a sense of validation on LinkedIn, and I can go and say, "Hi, I've just raised 6 million. Look at me, I'm the coolest," because I don't care about that. I actually don't. I care about what the money is going to help us achieve for the
Yeah.
people that we support, and that's where my fulfillment is. Actually, long time ago, I realized that as much as I love money, it's not a source of sustained fulfillment and happiness for me. It just gives me facilities that bring me joy, but my
Hmm.
fulfillment comes from genuine impact and from seeing that someone else's life has been positively impacted by the things we do at the Co-Created Hub. And I'm not opposed to funding at all. And funny, one of my potential angel investors was trying to change my mind about receiving funding, which is the
Yeah.
funniest story. Usually, you have to convince them to fund you, right?
Yeah.
And with me, it's just, and then he said, but you have to understand that investors, invest in you because it's also you, like you're in charge of the platform and where it goes. And I said, absolutely right, but I need to feel confident, not in myself. In myself, the confidence is there, but in the product itself. So, to your
Mm.
point, I think it's important to bring things to market, like try, fail. If you fail, try again, see what works, get real clients to give you real feedback, because what is the purpose of business? To serve, to add value, right?
Mm.
And
Definitely.
this is
Definitely.
this is how I see it's an exchange. And even if funding is there, but I need to keep raising in order to keep the business alive, that's not success to me, that's the ultimate failure. Sorry, maybe many founders will be upset by this, but I think we don't focus on profitability enough. That's what I think.
No,
The
I
right
think I
metrics.
think yeah, I think people are already, like you said, way in the future. There's a great book I'd recommend reading called The Lost and Founder by a guy called Rand Fishkin, and they ran a large in the SEO industry, a company called Moz, and he was on about when all was said and done, when he finally left that company, he worked out that and they raised millions and millions of pounds, right? And they turned down a big exit and tens of millions of pounds, actually, I think they raised. So, but he was saying about actually when he worked it out that this consultant that he also knew, who just was stayed by herself and just did consultancy for the 10 years. Whereas he was this big, I'm CEO. I've got this massive organization with 150 staff in. We're doing all of this stuff. I'm working every single hour under the sun. And actually, like he said at the end of it, she probably earned more money being a freelance consultant than he did, because he's not taking a £200,000 salary because he's got investors. He might be taking 50,000, 75,000
Yeah.
because he's working every single hour under the sun. He's managing this massive team. He's got investors breathing down his throat. Where's my return on investment? And yeah, I think sometimes it's just not what people like. The thing is, you raised that £6 million. That's not your £6 million. It's not like you've
Exactly.
just instantly gained £6 million. It's like now you need to go and put that to work. So what you were saying now, I think is the right thing. I'm definitely not against raising money or anything like that, but figure out the problem you want to solve first, and at least
Exactly.
start like working towards solving it before you start asking for other people's money. Because a real good question that you could ask yourself is, if I could get this money from my mum and dad, or like a family member or a partner or whatever, would I invest in the same? Would I be investing in this business or not? Because most people wouldn't take on that level of debt if it was their family member, but they're happy to take the investor down the road's cash. So I think it's just be careful what you wish for, as with everything in life.
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes I ask people because it's some of the founder events that we have hosted, and people always ask me about investors. And we want to raise 10 million. And I always ask them, but do you actually, where is this money going to go? Do you have a plan? Like, do you know exactly how every penny is going to be distributed, utilized? What's the strategy? Because otherwise, it's just, you're just wasting money, and you're not wasting your money, you're wasting investors' money. And my kind of first mentor gave me the best advice ever 2 years ago when I was considering funding. He said, Kristina, you are still testing. I'll never forget his words. He said, don't. You will get
Mm.
investors, you waste their money, and you have people hating you. And I was like, well, that's a bit dramatic. That's a bit because, again, not to kind of compliment myself, but I'm very charismatic and I know how to sell my product. And
Hmm.
before the see, I said, this is so funny. Now there will be so many comments. She said she's charismatic. You know what? Let's not play humble. But what I meant is that I know how to communicate. Well, I know how to communicate the value that the hub used to deliver when it used to operate as a founder only community, because it was a closed community, and I built it for myself as a home to myself. And before I even built it, I sold it for
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
like it's this was kind of, it came from my heart. Now everything has changed with the platform, how it's like the next level, version 2. But again, how this conversation started with a completely different intention. We speak about business. That's because we're both very passionate about it. I clearly, like, I am massively passionate about business. You are too. But I don't, funny enough, I don't want to talk about the co-created hub and kind of the next level. That's for LinkedIn. People will see that. No, it's coming. But what I want to talk about is the, the challenges that have impacted who we have become as leaders of businesses, but also as people. And we met in one of those private members clubs actually, but then we clicked, and I felt a connection with you because you were just very genuine, very open, and
Hmm.
very honest. And in, as you know, in those environments, there are all sorts of,
Mm.
people, some of them with egos, massive egos. And again, not against ego, but manage it. So when we reconnected, and I think it was like a couple of months, well, a year later, really, a year and a half later, and you were asking me how everything was going. And I did mention I had lost my dad, and that was last summer. And although I'm quite open about such experiences on social media because I don't want to portray a picture perfect life, I vlog and write about such experiences, and I like to share the journey for what it is, not for
Hmm.
making it, to look in a certain way. And then you shared that you also lost your dad.
Yeah.
And then we started having this kind of long conversation. And I said, Adam, would you like to be a guest on the Consciously Open podcast? Because this is a conversation that we should be having live. As
Mm.
you said, how did you manage to stay in business having gone through such a loss?
Mm.
And one of the things that I didn't realize back then was that the loss hits you months later after it actually happened.
Yeah, of
And
course.
I don't know whether you felt the same way, but I lost him last year in July, and it didn't feel real up until June this year, his birthday.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
out of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God, this is like wild. And those original couple of months after it happened, because it was very sudden, I went into full working mode. And
Hmm.
it was very much um, denial as well, shock and denial. And now, if I think about how I now navigate it, it's much harder. And I want to be very
Mm.
transparent and open about that. How was your experience? You were so much younger, you were 16. And I know it's not easy to talk about such things.
No, I mean, it's a long time ago. I actually, so I always find it quite fun. Well, not funny, but it was always quite interesting because I've had other losses of people not necessarily related to me, which I think have hit me. I think each loss hits you in a different way, depending on who you see that person is in your life or what role they play in your life. So for example, um, yeah, so for example, like the chap who was my team leader when I was 21, who was leaving the company, and I remember I got a disciplinary, and he had like 2 or 3 weeks left of his business to go, and he was like, Adam, you're too good to be working here. You should work for yourself. Like, and he helped me set up. And then he unfortunately was killed on a night out. Someone punched him once, and it killed him. That one hit me in a completely different way, where it's someone who's like your peer, who you're looking up to, someone who you're
Mhm.
sort of looking for guidance to, versus say when my dad, when I was a teenager, and he passed away, because verse, for example, I've had another male role model as well, who was sort of as close to a dad after my dad passed away. He then passed away randomly. To then really recently, there's been, unfortunately, which is really sad, there just seems to be a litany of people taking their own lives. And I've known 3 or 4 people this year who've took their own lives, unfortunately. And one of the guys, really sad, very successful SEO, doing very, very well. And I was with him last in, I'm not sure where it was. Maybe maybe last year in Chiang Mai, which was like November time, and we had a great time together. Really, really successful guy by all purposes, and then pops up. Unfortunately, he's taken his own life, and so I think each loss really hits you differently. So I think it's a very good conversation to have. So, in regards to, I think when my dad passed away, it's so hard because it's like half of my life ago. So I'm 32 now. So it was when I was 16. So it's very hard. But what I would say is I think it changes who you are, especially at that
Mhm.
age. So prior to that, I would say I don't think I've ever been that academic, but
Mhm.
I didn't really care about school. I had no motivation to do anything like that. I didn't really want to work hard. I wanted to waste time. I'd have never have thought like, oh, I'm going to run a business one day. And then I think the growing up in especially a working class type background, and then once I lost my dad, there was quite a big financial concern
Yeah.
to my family. And you realize that like some of the, unfortunately, the last things really I ever heard my dad say was about credit card debt. So that was pretty much not to me but to my mom before he passed away.
Gosh, we have
So
such
when
similar story. This is crazy. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's okay. But I'm just and I always say that to people because people have said that to me before, like, "Oh, you're too obsessed with money," or what you're working, or money at work isn't all this, and blah blah blah, all that stuff, right? And yeah, they might be right. But one of the things that is true is, yeah, money doesn't bring you happiness, but the lack of money presents massive problems, not just in, for your family, but in relationships, the people you leave behind, security, and all the rest of
Mhm.
it. So I think
Health.
that those sort of health, the places that you hang around, the food that you eat, stress levels, anxiety. So I think, yeah, so fundamentally, I think that shifted my thinking towards, wow, I need to solve this. Now, there was a lot of other issues, I think, which probably should have been sorted out at the time, which I've sort of tried to get to in my 30s with things like therapy and all the rest of it to try and understand that. But I just basically switched and went, you know what? I don't want to be old or age I pass away and leave people that I love with financial burdens, for one. And two, I would like to make sure that when I look back, I go, you know what, I was pretty successful. I managed to build something and I managed to have a level of success because so then I just sort of shifted the mindset really overnight, I think, when I was 16. And then I became, even though I wasn't the most academic, I didn't really know what I was doing. And people, by the way, have got way further, way faster than me. However, I think still I've seen internally that my shift completely
Mhm.
changed. And it was more about like, right, how do I do this? What are the steps? And I think, and this is the last thing I would say to anyone, but with dealing with grief or dealing with anything in life is, compare yourself not to others, but compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Like, as long as you're moving forward on your own path, that's enough. You don't want someone else's future. You don't want someone else's journey. Your own
Yeah.
journey's enough, right? So as long as you're moving forward and not backwards, then that's progress and that's success by any means, really. So I know it's a little long-winded sort of way of speaking about it, but that's sort of my 2 cents on that, I would say.
No, it's there's so many good points there, and even listening, I'm just feeling this kind of, how grief is felt in your body because I'm still like deep into that journey of like accepting that it's there. and learning to live with it, really.
Yeah.
But very similar situation. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he actually, what I really admire about him was the fact that he started his business after he turned 50. he,
Wow.
he remortgaged the house to fund it, and he scaled it within 3 years.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. And he was very much into cars, into trucks. He had a few trucks. And in the logistics industry, again, it is also who you hire and how well they take care of these vehicles, because it's not just about the revenue but also how much it costs to fix them, to deliver. And it was like
Mm.
a business heavy on assets.
Mm.
And in Eastern Europe, it's people do all sorts of things, right? So, and my dad, I remember he would pay his employees more than he would pay himself to get them to do the right
Mm.
thing, because he also had
Yeah.
people doing the wrong thing. Like one of the drivers just left the whole thing in Italy. Then, and it's just like and I remember being on holidays and him trying to solve problems with the drivers. And I was literally, I'm quite spiritual, and I remember I would just pray. I was still in the corporate world, and I would just pray for things to just get solved, because I could see how he was navigating that while we were on holiday. And then again, it's just lots of other things happened in his personal life, and that really led to, yeah, financial debt. And
Mm.
his mental health got worse.
Mm-hmm.
And out of his mental health got worse, I'm speaking very openly about the journey. He kept working up until the last day before he passed away. And I remember he always used to tell me I'm a little bit crazy to want to achieve what I want to achieve through my business. He's like, Kristina, you're describing nirvana. That doesn't exist on this planet. How are you gonna build it? And just before he passed away, I remember I started monetizing my intuitive abilities, and I was hiding. I was doing that very much behind the scenes, and I did not want to speak about it out of, obviously, ex corporate. My previous business won awards, although I shut it down. I was very afraid of how I was going to be seen. And kind of the proudest moment was at least to share with him how, like, people are paying me for this type of work. We're not speaking about standard
Mm.
business coaching. And he finally said, well done. I don't know why it was important for him to say well done and to be happy for me, like, I guess we always want to gain our parents' approval. And after it happened, because it was a heart attack with him and it was very sudden, I remember I went into this crazy working mode, like similar to you, I guess, because you had financial debt. I was like, I need a job right now, like fastest way like possible. I need to find a job, and it had to be the right role that would allow me to. I was kind of picky, I guess. I wanted to do something that I enjoy, but also with with not many responsibilities, not to lead a big team, so that I could figure out what I was going to do with the co-created hub and with my other business, which is a coaching company. And then that's how I navigated it. I just focused on work. But I'm not going to lie, some of
Mm-hmm.
my coping mechanisms weren't the healthiest. And you and I had a chat about that in private, and I'm not afraid to actually admit that. But did you, when you were going through that journey, did you catch yourself, like, what were those coping mechanisms? Because work was one of mine, but there were other coping mechanisms which are not that
Of
healthy.
course. Yeah, of course. So I think one of the things which becomes apparent, I think, when you go through those things. So I instantly seen work, and it was really interesting because, like I said before, I was not academic, didn't want to work, and I literally within a month or two, I remember going into college, and all of a sudden I became like the top student, and it was only like an interactive type media type thing, but I would be doing like obsessive amounts of work, like presentations 100 slides long, rather
Wow.
than just being like other people would do like 6 or 7. And but then it become like, okay, I'm going to become ridiculously hyper focused on learning how to code, and then that's why I had this really I love this the relationship with development and coding, because it was like I was like, oh my god, there's this world I can literally just spend like every single hour under the sun, and I can just focus on um, yeah, I can focus on just coding and all this stuff. The problem is I as time gets on, and then I started working for an agency, and they started you doing that. All of a sudden, you go, this isn't as fun anymore. I'm just doing it for other people to make money. So I think that was one of the, but that ability to like hyperfixate, I think is a,
Yeah.
it can be a superpower in a way, but then also I think what happened was, I think, is that I became very, very good at just never ever dealing or considering
Yeah.
the feelings whatsoever, and just being this like, I don't look at now and I don't look at behind me. I'm just looking forward. And even though I think in some respects it's quite an empowering way, like I'm working to the future. The problem is you
Yeah.
never live now. It's like you're
Yeah.
sacrificing now constantly for the future, and you never want to look behind. So yeah, so I just kind of had like a quite a, well, let that be in the past. But I think over time these things start coming up, and then yeah, I think the tendency with what you've said, you can get into unhealthy work habits, unhealthy relationships,
Yeah.
unhealthy not necessarily like becoming an addict on drink or drugs or any of those sort of things, but more it's the relationship to those sort of mediums. Like, why are you doing that sort of stuff? And I think if you find yourself that your only escape is drinking or going to parties or trying to whatever it may be, if that is the only reason, it's because it's giving you escape from the now, then it all catches up to you. Like it really does all catch up to you. And I think it really finally caught up to me because obviously I lived in London, and I was just I started getting panic attacks last year, and then the panic attacks were getting worse. I went from like one a month to like one a week to then like one a day, and it just got worse and worse and worse.
Wow.
And then and then in the end I was like, you know what, like I have to unfortunately, leave my life there, let that go, and I won't be afraid to say it. I went and moved back in with family, and I took a lot of this year getting back onto my feet again. But because and then I think once I got away from that, I realized how much anxiety I had, how much because remember you're not confronting things, but that stuff confronts you when you're in the shower by yourself or when you're
Yeah,
going to sleep by
exactly.
yourself. And
Yeah,
then you have that, but then also you have all of your, this client wants this, and all of a sudden, like I found
exactly.
that my business started going backwards. Maybe we started to lose some customers because my eye wasn't on the ball, and then the team below you, and you have all these external pressures. So I needed a reset. But one of the key things which I'd say there, and I think you obviously know it yourself as well, is the ability to like, okay, the ability to not give up and to actually go, you know what, even if I have to take a few steps back, as long as I'm still in the race, like I'm still in the race, right? And so I think that's like a really good, and also as well, a lot of these things, unfortunately, they can be weighted out with time. Like time is a great healer. So like a really powerful thing I always think is like, maybe you won't be able to beat this feeling or solve this feeling right now, but if you can just wait it out and just wait it out, you can get there. And as you get through to the next day, and then you can start to rebuild things, etc. So it's not a linear journey. I don't think. I think everyone's going to have different experiences with how they deal with it. And I think the best thing that I think you can do is just find out what works for you. And I think try and find something that is positive and constructive and doesn't self sabotage. Because and unfortunately, I think one of the big things which has held me back over the years from really getting to the next stage, it's not mindset or anything. It's self sabotage, 100% self sabotage. And I think that comes from a rooted. I think self sabotage is you going, you know what, I'm in control of this self sabotage. Like, there's all these things out which are completely outside of my control, but my self sabotage, I am fully in control of. And I think that a lot of people struggle with that. So I think try and find something which is positive rather than self sabotage, I guess. But it's easier said than done, really.
So much wisdom there, Adam. So much wisdom there. And I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy we're recording this. And as I said before we actually hit record, we don't have a script for this conversation. We wanted to just speak about things that, are important to us. And thank you for sharing these things, because it's not easy to speak about such topics, first of all. And I think when you face such a loss, there are no right or wrong ways of dealing with it. Mine was very similar
Hmm.
in a sense, like work, positive. However, I started partying, things which I was never into partying. And I moved into a community kind of living space where there were like parties in on one of the floors, and I caught
Hmm.
myself even learning how to play poker. When have
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
been into poker? When And then going into unhealthy relationships, and the reason why they're unhealthy was because I used the relationship as a distraction. And as you
Yeah.
know, when you are using a relationship as a distraction, then you have two people that are getting emotionally involved with each other without being there for each other. This is actually called a situationship, because perhaps they're not right for each other, but yet that was a big distraction for me to not think about. It's almost like it filled that void until it
Mm.
backfired. And then I found myself having two voids to fill.
Yeah.
This one. So don't. Why am I sharing these things so openly? Because I can guarantee that you and I are not the only people who have gone through things like that. And I think it's so important. Anyone who is going to be listening to this conversation, it is important for them to self reflect on coping mechanisms about any loss. Whether it's the loss of a parent, which is one of the most difficult things, whether it's the loss of a relationship, and
Mm.
healthy ways to fill that void, in a sense, right? Because
Mm.
when there is a loss, you immediately feel it. And what are those coping mechanisms that are actually good for you? Like, I loved how you said that you found your, like, that hyper fixation was actually a superpower, and I love how you frame
Mm.
that, because as I was listening, I'm
Mm.
thinking that that's also a trauma response, but it's a good trauma
100%.
response. No, it's a good trauma response
Mm.
because you develop skills. And maybe sometimes it's not yet the right time to face the trauma. I'm facing it now, a year later. I wanted to start a
Mm.
charity. I started it. I did nothing with it because I'm still going through my process.
Mm.
And that was, I'm facing it now. I did not face it
Yeah.
when it happened. Everyone
Mm.
deals with it differently.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like is it a positive, how are you handling things, or is it a trauma response? So I think that the problem with hyperfixating, I think, on work and there's a very close line between that and materialism, and a focus on materialism, and then a focus on status, or a focus on what you said before about things like ego. So um, I think there's a real fine line towards it. One of the things that I would say is, and one of the dangers, and I've been guilty of it, and I've been guilty of it even this year, and it's something that I still struggle with now, is I think when you can kind of get into this world, especially when you're a founder, what you can then do is you can peg your self-worth to your company,
Yeah.
and because you're so transfixed in it. And the problem with that is it's all very well and good when it's going well, but it's such a public failure or a public thing to do, that when your business maybe starts going backwards, or there's no sort of upwards trajectory which is consistent in business. But the problem with that is if your self-worth is then coming from that, because you have all of these ways of dealing with your trauma or whatever else,
Yeah.
then it can really knock you, and then you can really feel like you're losing out in the world, or like that you're a failure or whatever else, and
Yeah.
then that sort of compounds your anxiety even more. So, and I think the other danger is sort of what I've been guilty of doing consistently, is just no longer finding other things interesting. It's like, unless it's work, unless it's this, do you know, like, you just don't care. It's like,
I am
I
there.
remember, yeah,
How?
no
How'd you fix
hobbies.
that? How'd you
I
fix
don't.
that?
I haven't really. I've got so I've had two or three therapists now. So at 30, 31, I started getting therapy. I thought it was a bit of a joke before I did it. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, each time I've sort of fell out of it. I've actually got a call at like 6:30 around getting tested for things like ADHD or autism, because the therapists I've had have said that I've sort of lent towards that. So I was like, so even like I'm trying to do that. Like I think it's like 6:30. I've got a call appointment in regards to
Oh,
actually properly getting tested for it now. Because one of the reasons why is because I was like, I don't have that. Like, I don't find other things interesting. Like, I don't.
I'm the
So it's
same.
like, yeah, like, I don't have hobbies. Like, what hobbies do you have? Working, like, sales. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, what? That's all. It's all work related, right? And the
Mm,
problem with that though is you can never switch your brain off, which is
yeah.
amazing in proportions. But what I find is that you go up and then you go into these slumps, and then you become really like, I'd start becoming quite cynical as well. Like, I'd be like, cynical towards other people. What people are wasting their time doing this, or wasting their time doing that. Why they do that for? Because you're just like, when actual fact it's like, no, they have the ability to be able to switch off. And if the only way that you can switch off is by partying or drinking or doing some sort of self-destructive what trait, then you're going to crash, right? And it's going to burn,
Yeah.
and you're going to burn out. So yeah, the point is when you were saying about I don't think I've sold it at all. I think everyone, again, I think there's a great book called 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. So I always try to stick by some of the rules in that. One of the rules, for example, is, don't be, what's it? Don't be scared to stop at it. No, don't forget to pet a stray cat when you see it in the street. And that's like one of the chapters. It's something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
And I think the purpose of that is that your world can be falling down around you, but if you can find beauty in something as small as petting a cat or a dog, or listening to the birds or whatever it may be, right? Then you can get through a lot by finding the beauty in the small things. So I think, yeah, I think everyone's just on that journey, and I think as long as you try and keep putting you one step in front of the other, then hopefully you'll get there. But unfortunately, the really sad thing is like, again, like I said, that does seem, unfortunately, especially I've known quite a few people sadly in the last 6 or 9 months who've taken their own lives, right?
Yeah.
Because and a lot, unfortunately, that seems quite rife right now in the entrepreneur business space. And whether that's a correlation to the pressures, or whether that's a correlation to things like AI destroying a lot of people's livelihood and them being able to try needing to keep up with stuff. Whether, who knows what it is, but one of the things which is real, I think one of the things which isn't spoken about with entrepreneurship, and by what you said before about your dad as well, is abundantly clear, is it's bloody stressful,
Mental
and
health.
you mental health, but also that anxiety has an impact on your health. And that's one of the things which scares me as well. Is like when you're 21, 22, 23, 24, you could sort of take that, and all of a sudden I'm like, your body's in a perpetual state of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
When you get into your 40s, 50s, it does make things like heart attacks, strokes, unhealthy
Exactly.
living activities, like it raises all of those things. So I think, again, be careful and go into entrepreneurship or business with your eyes wide open. And I fully know that I would much rather run it, going back to the investment thing, I'd fully rather run a smaller business which maybe turns over a couple of thousand a year, but there's 2 or 3 people I like working with and we have a good relationship and my anxiety is lower, than trying to run a business which does 5 million a year and I have investors breathing down me every single day saying, where's the profitability? How are we going to get here? X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z. Like, I would take the first any day of the week, whereas I think 5, 10 years ago I probably wouldn't have. I'd have seen the number and went, oh my God, the number's great. But
Yeah.
the anxiety and the ability to be able to sleep and enjoy what you do and go through life and find the beauty in the small
But
things,
this
I
is
think comes at a cost.
absolutely everything you're saying. This is just so important. And I think people need to be very clear on their motivations and what it actually
Mm-hmm.
takes to get there. And we focus a lot on holistic wellness in the Co-Created Hub, again, inspired by my own journey of facing all sorts of mental health. I was diagnosed with a severe depressive disorder, given pills that I never took. And kind of
Mm-hmm.
my connection with, I call it like the superconscious mind, like the aura, the higher mind. This is what kind of kept me sane. But at the same time, everything you're describing is actually real for many people. And I think if people need to be mindful of the consequences of their choices, whether the choice is a
Mm.
coping mechanism or the choice is getting funding, and they need to be very clear on their why, the vision for their
Mm.
life, and what it would actually take to get there, and also will they enjoy the journey. Because similar to you, it's so strange you're bringing that up, because I've been reflecting a lot on why I kind of achieved a big milestone for me in August, like with the business, and I did not feel happy. And I'm like,
Mm.
I actually started feeling depressed because I wasn't feeling happy. And I started blaming myself for not being grateful. And there was not a single thing to not be grateful for. And I'm like, why does it not feel enough? And then when I realized that it's never going to feel enough, then I said to myself, then what's the point? And I think people taking their own lives, that what's the point thought is the most dangerous thought ever. And if anyone is listening to this conversation, if you're having these thoughts, what's the point? Find someone you can speak with. That's exactly why I started the Sparrow Group Foundation, which is a mental health charity for male entrepreneurs to have a safe space
Mm.
to verbalize these thoughts. It's in my dad's name. He used to call me Sparrow. That's why it's called the Sparrow Group
Mm.
Foundation. But
Oh,
haven't
that's
done
so
much
good.
with it. Haven't done much with it. I need to be patient with myself. I come first right now. So technically mental health is important, but we just need to be a bit more mindful. We need to be a bit more open, perhaps even on platforms like social media, because we face many things in isolation, also because of the brands we've built. And
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the things what people have to, because this isn't really spoke about that much, is and one of the things I've struggled with over the years is the so one of the things which I do with my phone, I have no notifications on. My WhatsApps don't ping up. My messages don't ping up. My phone is consistently on silent and doesn't ping up. And it sometimes really, if I would normally swear, but it annoys people, it annoys customers. But the reason why I've done that and it still gets through is because you have to remember when you're running a business and then you have grief, you still have customers, investors, team members to deal with. And the problem is that people go through life and people have their own issues, but oftentimes someone will drop into your messages and basically give you abuse at any
yeah.
point of the day. And just because you're a founder, you sort of have to deal with it. I mean, I had it the other day. One of my team members hadn't sent a client that I'd worked with, and I get a voicemail and I'm in this call and it's a really positive call. And I look down at the phone and it's like, your customer service is and like the voicemail had like put the asterisks in it and all the rest of it. I've had it before. Like I had once a customer call me drunk at like 11:30 at night,
Oh,
being
wow.
abusive. Yeah, I've had so many things. I've had people say they want to beat you up and all sorts of stuff, right? And I think one of the things which so I have to do that because I can't deal with so I've even got to the stage where I became quite bad messaging people back, messaging back things. So actually now I've got to the stage of have specific focus areas where everything gets turned off. But that I don't necessarily think that's like a productivity hack. That's like an anxiety on me where I've found that when I just allow these like devices, whether it be social media, whether it be even customers messaging, like I don't want people to have access to me. Like even 10 years, 15 years ago, right? People just didn't have direct access to ruin your day, make you feel like rubbish, like make you feel like you're doing a bad job, speak to you like that you're
Yeah.
useless or whatever. And it's like one of so I'd always say to people like that's one of the hidden things of entrepreneurship or running a business that doesn't really get spoken about. Is like when you're having a bad day, believe me, for some reason the universe makes it worse by
It's
chucking
true.
something in, or maybe you just made
Yeah.
maybe you just made a one silly mistake. You forgot to hit send on an email and it's set in a draft, and a customer's had to wait an extra few hours. And sometimes people speak to you like nonsense. And the best thing I'd say to that is do something like that. Turn notifications off. Like you need to separate yourself from this stuff because this is
Yeah.
what causes the anxiety, man. It does. So
100%.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I struggle with. So I like now, I just will like the best thing I enjoy is just like one of the reasons I won't move back to London is that I don't want that. I found coming out in London then another level of anxiety because you're walking around thinking someone's going to steal your phone or someone's going to rob you because London's lawless these days. So I think you have to find out who you are and who you're not. And I thought I was I'm a London guy. There's loads of business here. There's loads of network, and I'm going to meet people in my business. But actually, I despise the place because, like you said at the start, one, you go to these places, 50% of the people are absolute fakers anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's true. They have ego problems. Or it's a crazy place. And I was like, I'm not happy here at all. So yeah, just be careful about. There's so many things trying to get your attention and stuff right now. Like, just keep that under control. I think because your ability to be able to focus on your goal is critical.
With so many distractions that are trying to get that attention, attention is energy, energy is everything. So to kind of wrap up this conversation, because as always with all my podcast guests, we can just keep going forever because it's such an important topic and we can expand it much more, but I try to keep these conversations up to an hour. So let's end with your favorite quote and why this
Yeah.
is your
So
favorite quote.
yeah. So I said to you actually before that I think it's my favorite quote. I think it's the quote which had the biggest impact on my life, and I don't think that I knew the quote before I started doing it, if that makes sense. And then I remember So after my dad passed away, I became really obsessed with reading and self-development. I
Mm-hmm.
think, but when I shifted, and I was like, oh my God, I can get better. And I read an incredible book by a magician called Darren Brown. And in there, he speaks about how he hypnotizes people to get over self-anxiety. So I'm a very anxious person. My mum is a very anxious person. Her dad was an incredibly anxious person. Like I
Wow.
have that. And the problem with that is when you're making decisions, you have to take risks. And anxiety, you have to be able to determine what is your own insecurity and anxiety versus what when you should pull the trigger and ignore that. And but this was when I was like 17. And in this book, he spoke about, look, if you're ever giving a presentation, for example, and someone says, who's doing the presentation first? Even if you're the most nervous, be like, I'm going to do it first. Because everyone in the class or everyone in the area goes, oh, that guy's not nervous. He's going first and he's going to do it first. And I think the whole concept, what he was trying to put across is act as if that you're the most confident person in the room and you'll become confident. And then years later, I was watching some sales training, and that was where that sort of concept, and I was like, oh my God, that's what he was speaking about in that book is, act as if you're a confident person and you'll be confident. Act as if you have control of your grief and you'll have control of your grief. Act as if you're a calm person and you'll be calm. Act as if you're the most successful person in the room and you'll walk and talk and act like the most successful person in the room. Act as if you're going to close a sale, you'll probably close a sale. So I think that has, especially someone, I've always felt like I've probably had to work harder than some people. I feel that I think it hasn't always came as natural to me as other people. I think I'm not the smartest person in the room. I don't necessarily think I'm that academically that smart, to be honest with you, or in those things. But I think one of the things that has definitely allowed me to outpace other people, I know everyone's in their own journey, is this ability to sort of go, before you go into something, is just take a second to go, I'm the man. Like, I'm going to act as if I'm the man. I'm going to act as if I'm going to go in here and do that. And I think if you do that, most times, you know what, there's a caveat to that, though, which I learned later on, which is I think acting as if you're something is absolutely fine and a great way of pushing yourself forward. I think the bit which is missing from it is the ability that once you've acted as that person and you've got what you needed to get out of the situation, you need to then go and become that person. Because
Yeah.
there's no point acting all the way through your life, otherwise you'll just be a snake oil salesperson. So I think it's that,
Mm-hmm.
like, the second part of that is, okay, wow, I've got that deal now. I've acted as if I'm this expert, and actually I'm not. Well, you better go and work really, really hard to become that expert because you've just sold someone on it. So I think that's sort of a caveat to that, and become that person. So yeah, act as if anyway is probably the quote which
Love
had the
it.
biggest impact on my life.
Mindset and substance. First comes
Exactly.
mindset, then comes substance. Substance, then mindset builds on that, right? Brilliant.
Yeah,
I love
100%,
that.
100%.
Thank you so much for joining me. And for everyone who wants to learn more about how you support clients getting more visible through the power of SEO, they can just Google Ignite SEO, right? And then you will come up probably on top of Google, technically.
Yeah, they can search Ignite SEO. They can search Adam Collins SEO. You can write SEO Agency London, whatever. I know we'll usually come up somewhere. And we can help people. One of the things which I will always say is SEO is an interesting thing. AI is an interesting thing now, but there's not been a great opportunity than right now because this whole influx of AI, the
Mhm.
people which are adopting these sorts of AI and Google search and AI overviews, there's so much opportunity right now.
Mhm.
So if you are looking to do these types of things, obviously just quote this podcast. We'll give you a free taster. We'll set up a consultation. They can have some of my time for
Fabulous.
free, and
Thank
we
you.
can go through some stuff and do it. But yeah, it's been a great podcast. I think we touched on some stuff, and be sure Adam Collins SEO.
Thank you.
Thank you.